Well, good morning, everybody. Good morning for people who are here with us this morning, all the brave ones. I'm just kidding, the ones that are paid to be here and required to be here. Also, thank you to everyone who's streaming online, no matter where you're at. Pastor Matt did say, watch on your couch. I heard some people might be steaming and streaming. I don't know if that means bath or whatever. That's okay. There's probably people out there who are driving. We don't encourage you to do that, but thank you for being here as well. I do have a confession to make for all of our people that attend here on Sunday mornings. I did not park in the gravel parking lot. I parked front row as close as I could get to the building, so I just want to get that off my chest before we get started. But again, if you've never met me, my name is Jimmy. I'm one of the pastors here. And something I was thinking about this morning was, talking to an online audience is a little bit different than talking to a select few people. But thankfully, I have some of my friends here. But normally, we don't encourage people to talk or look at their phones in church during the gatherings. But today, I want to encourage you to do so. The reason why is because if you don't know me, I am very interactive. And I love people. I get my energy from people. And so you have permission today and however many other weeks that we're going to be doing this to actually get on your phones, type, interact with me, interact with us. I might get on later just to make sure that you're doing these things. So if I say hello, then you can say hello back. That would be your cue to say, hello, Jimmy. That just keeps us all going here. And I'll pretend that I'm watching you. But again, if this is your first time watching us from wherever you're at, welcome. If this is the second time, let us know. Glad you're here. But stay connected through the entire series in this entire message, because as we work through today, I'm going to be asking you some questions. And normally I would have you write these things on something that we would give you as you walked in to our building this morning. But Pastor John, our moderator, is actually going to post a link to a PDF document that you can print out. And write some of these things, but stay started. So if we're ready to get started, I'm ready to get started. Are you guys ready to get started? Are you guys ready to get started? All right. So starting today, 4-week series, brand new, called Ignite. And throughout this series, we're going to be talking about how one life has potential to change the world. One life has potential to change the world. But more specifically, how your life has the potential to change the world. And let me ask you a question. Have you ever thought about the possibility that your life has a potential to change the entire world, everything around the globe? And all of your failures and all of your mess-ups and all of your insecurities about yourself, that maybe you still have the potential to make a huge impact in the world. Have you ever thought about that? That maybe 30 years from now, your name gets posted somewhere, maybe a news article, and people hear that name and they're like, that's really good. I know I've always thought about that. I think it'd be really cool if everyone all over the world knew the name Jimmy George. Sometimes I just love too much hearing my own name come out of other people's mouth. But just in case you're thinking that might be too big, I want to ask you to go a little bit smaller with me. Have you ever thought about the potential that your life has to make in the city of Omaha or Elkhorn? That when people hear your name, they recognize that as something good. Have you ever thought about that? Or maybe that might be still too big, but how about your street? Have you ever thought, I can make a difference on my street? Have you ever thought about that? Or that coworker that you work with that works inside those, what do you call those things? Those pods? Cubicles. Have you ever thought about your life making a difference in that person's life? Or the barista that you see every morning when you stop to get your coffee? But have you ever thought about that maybe you're the key to changing someone else's life? I know there's moments in my life where I don't think I could ever have the potential to do that, but then there's times when I do. But maybe you know something about that someone, and as they're talking, they say something, and in that conversation, you're like, you know what, I could probably help them with that. For example, some people are good with money. I know a lot of people that are just really good with money. They're great making it. They're good budgeting it. And in those conversations, when those people who are good with money are listening to people, they're like, you know what, I might be able to help you with that. And if you could just spend a few minutes with them looking at their finances, you could probably change that person's life just by spending a few minutes with them. And you're comfortable talking about it. You want to help, and someone asks a question, you talk freely about it because it's natural to you. Or how about people who are good with parenting? There's a lot of people who are really good at parenting. Some people not so much. We all could probably think about some people who aren't that great at parenting, but there are people who are really good at parenting. And you've learned the secret to discipline not given those children everything that they need. And if you could only share that information with other people, then maybe you could help them out. And you talk freely about it. But people are also, maybe there's some people that are good at marriage. We all can think about those people who are really good at marriage. There's some people who are good at encouragement and nutrition, and they want to help people with their nutrition. There's times when people ask me, hey, can I help you with your nutrition? I'm not exactly sure why they keep asking me this question, but they do. Some people are good at building muscle, like Pastor Matt. He's really good at building muscle. He's always knowing which arm to flex, depending on which camera is looking at him. But some people are good at Netflix. I mean, if you're online right now and you're like, I got a Netflix episode going and the sermon, don't let us know that, because I might go back and feel bad later for reading that. But something I was thinking about the other day were those multi-level marketing, I'm afraid to use the word scheme, but I'm going to, because that's what's coming out of my mouth right now. But some people are really good at those things. Like, I know some followers of Christ who are like just amazing at this multi-level marketing stuff. They're selling the juice, they're selling the creams. I'm not saying these things are bad for you, because they are really good at it. But what I'm saying is these people are really good at selling this stuff, especially online. Sometimes you earn unfollows, but hey, you're good at it. You're comfortable talking about it. But whatever it is, if you're good at it, if something has really changed your life, it becomes natural for you to talk about it. It becomes natural for you to talk about it. And we love to talk about it. We're comfortable with these things. And we actually look for ways to share about these things with other people. If we hear a TV show we like, we want to tell other people about it and how cool it is, right? But we're really good at these things. But when it comes to God, when it comes to sharing about Jesus, our faith, people are way, way more hesitant. And why is that? Well, I believe that we want to, but we're a little bit shying away from it. But why is that? Let's be honest with ourselves for a moment. Do you shy away from talking about your faith with others? If you're online, here's part of my interaction. Yep, just type yep. If you're a little bit nervous sometimes to share your faith with others, let's be honest with ourselves. We can be a little bit nervous with that. But have you ever thought about why that might be? Well, in my role, I get to hear about why this must be a lot of the times. And here are some of the things that I hear about when people say they don't share their faith with others. And these are very common, so you're probably going to be able to identify with one of them. I'm too nervous. I mean, how many of you guys are sometimes too nervous to kind of start talking about your faith? I might be too shy. I'm not very outgoing. There's people who aren't outgoing. That's okay. Some people are afraid of rejection. I'm afraid that if I actually say something that I might be rejected for what I believe about Jesus. We don't want to lose those friends. I know there's been moments in my life when I don't want to share my faith because I'm afraid that might sever that relationship with someone. We don't know what to say. Some of us don't know how to start the conversation. Some of us don't want to push our faith on others. Maybe we don't think that faith is really that big of a deal, and that's why we don't share our faith with others. Some people just don't think it's that big of a deal. What's true for you is what's true for me. It's not true for you. That whole thing, it's not that big of a deal. But we're going to be talking about these over today and the next 3 weeks. But here's my question. If Jesus can provide life, if your faith can provide life for people here now and for eternity, why don't we share our faith with them? If you know the life-changing key that can bring life to people, why don't we share our faith with others? Just like we would our money, our TV shows, our parenting skills, our nutrition skills. We're good at those things, but why don't we share that about our faith? Just as we believe in nutrition is good for our bodies and can change a person's life, our faith too can change our entire life. But why don't we talk about these things? But as we move throughout today and the next several weeks, I really want you to know this, that not every single person, not all of us have the same circle of influence. Everyone has a different circle of influence. What if you're the only person who knows Jesus in your building that you work in? You're downtown Omaha. You're the only person in there that knows Jesus. What if you're the only person in here that knows him? What about if you're the only person who knows Jesus at your school or maybe in your classroom? What if you're the only person that has faith in God in your classroom? Or what if you're the only person who knows Jesus on your street? And only one person might share their faith, and that might be you someday. But what if you're the only person on your street? And it's extremely important that we address these things. And to start our series off, to start this week off, I want to turn our attention to a passage in the book of Matthew, because this is going to be the basis of our series that we talk about for the next 3 weeks. But if you're familiar with the Bible and you read it often, you're going to recognize this passage right away. This is what contains what has come to be called the Great Commission. If you're not familiar with the Bible, that's okay. We just got finished with a 6-week series all about the Bible. I really encourage you to go listen to that. But if you're not familiar with the Bible, this is found in the second half of it. It's going to be the very first book of the New Testament. But I want to look at this together in Matthew chapter 28, verse 16. Then the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain where Jesus had told them to go. Now, some quick context. Jesus has spent a few years with his disciples. It's been about 3 years. And through them, they saw Jesus performing miracles. They saw Jesus healing people in an instant. They saw someone come back to life. Jesus taught them many things, how to love and how to live. He predicted his death and resurrection, and then he pulled it off and rose again. And so now they're standing on a mountain because Jesus told them to go there. Jesus says, hey, I want you to go to this mountain and wait for me. And so that's where this passage picks up. And this is after Jesus' resurrection. Verse 17, when they saw him, they being the 11 disciples who had spent most of the time with Jesus, they worshiped him, but some doubted. Then Jesus came to them and said, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you. This is Jesus speaking. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age. So after Jesus had spent 3 years with those he called to follow him, he gave this command to the apostles. And then what happens? He ascends to heaven and disappears right before their very eyes. Now I can't imagine what that must be like. They're probably thinking, we're going to continue to see and be with this guy. But he gave these last words and then he ascended straight to heaven. I wonder what that would be like. But this command that he gave basically outlines what Jesus expected of his disciples and those who would follow him. And then he ascended to heaven, but he left these last words. He said, verse 19, go and make disciples. Go baptize them. And go teach them about my commands, about how to follow me, about how to obey me. And I don't want to get into everything that a disciple is at this point, but in its most basic form, a disciple of Jesus is someone who follows Jesus, someone who's learning from Jesus. And this is a progression. Following Jesus, let's take a deep breath, it's a progression. It's not something that you become perfect at right away. There's a lot of people that are nervous to follow Jesus or to make that commitment to him because I'm not perfect. But following Jesus is a progression. But a disciple is a person who has put their faith in Jesus by asking him to be the forgiver of their sins and leader of their life. They get baptized because that's commanded in Scripture. They begin growing in a relationship with him. That's the progression. And this person continually lives to be transformed by him in every area of their life, not just on Sundays, but in their public life, in their private life, in their relationships with others, on Facebook, off Facebook, in their marriage, in their home, how they interact with one another, in their parenting, in their finances, in their workplace. This person lives to be transformed by Jesus in all those areas, and it's a progression, but a disciple of Jesus is someone who basically is following Jesus. But Jesus said, go and make disciples of all nations, of all people everywhere. The word nations doesn't mean countries, it just means all people groups, but everywhere around you. And he's saying, my time physically on earth is done for now. And I've shown you how to do it. He's talking to his 11. Now it's your turn. It's your turn. Now go. Teach them. Teach them what to do, how to love, how to pray, how to care for one another. And how to sacrifice everything for other people, not just think about yourselves. Go. There are people who need my love and my transforming work. Now go, because I've showed you, you can do this. I've showed you how to do this. Go teach people how to be set free. Go teach people how to forgive and how to be forgiven. Go multiply. Go reproduce. Go make more followers of me. Go spread my love all over the world. And go turn the world upside down. And then Jesus ascends to heaven right before their very eyes. Gives me goosebumps thinking about what that might have been like. And all 11 of them, normal people, with the entire world right before their eyes and their face, right in front of them, those were his last words. And you know what these 11 guys did? They did it. Those 11 people ignited a movement that changed the world. And you can read all about this in the book of Acts. If you have never read the book of Acts, go read the book of Acts this week. It's pretty easy to read through. It's just story. It's the history of the church. But you can read all about that in the book of Acts. And they did. And they went and they traveled. They shared the gospel. They baptized people. And they began teaching them everything that Jesus commanded them to teach. They weren't coming up with new things. They were teaching everything that Jesus showed them. And they continued to make disciples, who made disciples, who made disciples, who made disciples, who made disciples. And then here we are today, talking about disciples. And it's still happening. Because of a few normal people who did exactly what Jesus said to do, and they started to do it. And you know who else is called to do the same thing? You. You. Misty, you. Amy, Nick, you. Bryn, you too. Everyone in here, Walter, you. Everybody is called to go and make disciples. Everyone watching right now online, wherever you are called to go and make disciples. If you've put your faith in Jesus, you are called to go and share your faith with others. If you put your faith in Jesus last week, you. If you've been following Jesus for 30 years, still you. And even if you're not a follower of Jesus in here, you. Because there are people, we learn about them in the New Testament, 11 people, 12 people who were called, Jesus called them. They're just normal fishermen. I was out in San Francisco a couple years ago, and I was looking at some fishermen. They're kind of smelly, and they're dirty, and they're pulling fish out of the ocean and cutting them up right then. I'm like, that is who Jesus called to go and make disciples and share his name across everywhere in this world. And they did it. And this is why we are here today. But Jesus came on a mission to transform this world, and he called his church to carry on that mission. And if you're a follower of Jesus, you have not been disqualified from that because it's written in the Bible from something that happened over 2,000 years ago that still applies to us today. In your workplace, you're part of that mission. At your school, you're part of that mission. As you're sitting in your house, those people in your family, you're part of that mission. On your street, you're part of that mission. You are called to go and make disciples of all nations. For people streaming right now, this is your chance to write me. Because I want you to know that you too are called to go and make disciples. This is where you type me. For everyone in here, say me. Me. Good job. Now, some people will immediately start saying, nope. You know, I think about those gifts you can send, like, nope, not me. There's people paid to do that. Yeah, right, I don't know how to teach someone else. I'm just new at this whole thing. And there's some people who have been part of the church for a very long time who think about that, go and make disciples, as you actually have to leave your place of employment, you leave your street, you move out of your house, and you fly over to another country, and that's where you live to go make disciples. But that is not what is being said here. If you look up the Greek in this passage, the word go, in some forms is like as you go about your life. This is your one concern, but as you go about your life, go and make disciples. Go share my love with other people. And that is exactly why we're doing this series, because we want to make this practical. We want to make it seem easy, because it is easy. It's a lot easier to share your faith than you think. Because 1,000 people that call Relevant their home are way more influential than our 14 paid staff that we have here at this church. And that's why we come back together on Sundays. It's almost like a rally point. We all gather together, we worship God, we experience him, we learn stuff, and then we go back to where we were at and we start sharing Jesus' love in word and deed and action. But that's why we're here. And that's why we still live stream no matter what is happening, because we still need one another to encourage one another. Because those people you live by, Jesus wants to transform them too. He knows you're there, and he knows they're there, and he just wants us to do our part. Those people you work with, he wants to save them. Those family members who have made terrible decisions, and quite frankly, sometimes we don't want to be around, he wants to share his love with them too, through you. And your life has the potential to ignite the faith in those people, and over the next 3 weeks, we're going to be looking at 4 ways to do so. And by ignite, real quick, I mean to spark interest, make come alive, just make people curious about it. If you're not a follower of Jesus in here, and maybe you are exploring what this looks like, maybe you're listening online, you're like, I've been watching you for a while, I'm just kind of still learning what this might be like. I'm glad you're listening. I just invite you to see what God has in store for you in this whole thing, that you begin to discover who Jesus really is, because he loves you and he has a plan for you and he wants you to experience his freedom. But for the rest of us, for all followers of Jesus, relevant, that's all of us listening online, my prayer for you, and this is my wholehearted prayer, and this is our wholehearted prayer for you, is that you see the importance and significance of your life when it comes to those people in your circle of influence. Not that you simply come and you listen and then you leave and you go about your week, but that this message, this series, and everything we always talk about on Sundays kind of gets in your mind and just kind of rearranges some things. You start thinking, what, I need to live a little bit differently. But just start thinking about these things, because as you go about your life, that we want you to gain confidence in sharing your faith and get some faith and get boldness. But it's easier than you think. Now, the first way to ignite the faith in those around us, and I would say this is probably the easiest way to ignite the faith in someone else, so we all have this in common. It's my story. Everyone say my story. Where you're at, say my story. In your living room, wherever you're at, just say that, my story. And now we all love stories. We love stories. I love stories. I love hearing them. I love telling them. My kids love telling stories. Sometimes they get a little bit too long. When your children tell stories, they use a lot more words, a lot of uhs and My wife and I have this kind of a secret thing that when one of our children start telling us a story, if it gets too long, we'll just kind of start leaning over like, oh my gosh, start picturing that skeleton going on. But we love stories. We just need to teach them how to tell stories. But your story can ignite the faith in someone else. Think about that. Your story, my story, can ignite the faith in someone else. It can make it come alive. And we're real big on stories here at Relevant, because stories are a powerful thing. And we teach people how to tell their story in what we call volunteer staff orientation, because stories are a powerful thing. And we tell stories when someone is getting baptized, because stories are a powerful thing. And we love to hear stories, because stories are a powerful thing. They transform lives. We love the before, we love the after, we like finding out what it was that caused them to change, whatever it is, because stories are one of the most powerful tools. Your story is one of the most powerful tools that will ignite the faith in someone else, as long as you know how to do it. And if you learn how to tell your story, when the time comes, and we'll talk about this throughout this series, when the time comes that you're able to do it with confidence and that you know your story. But how do we do that? How do we tell our story? How do we learn how to tell our story? Well, I want to take another look at a story in the Bible about a blind man. We're going to take a look at John chapter 9, because this story in the Bible shares how to tell a story in the most basic and most simplest way. And we're going to fly through this passage, but in short, it's about a blind man who had an amazing encounter with Jesus, and he basically tells the story to people. But in John chapter 9, verse 1, as he, who is Jesus, went along, he saw a blind man from birth. And his disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Now, at that time, there was a belief that if someone was born blind or born deaf, that some people believe at that time that it was because the parents had sinned. And Jesus debunks that, and he basically dismisses that, but people believe that. But he says in verse 3, neither this man nor his parents sinned, said Jesus, but this happened so that the works of God might be displayed. And then Jesus goes on to say some more things. And then in verse 6, after saying this, Jesus, he's standing with this blind man, spits on the ground, made some mud with the saliva, and put it on the man's eyes. That probably wouldn't fly today, I think, especially today. But that's what Jesus did. He can do what he wants, and that's what he did. And he said, "Go, wash in the pool of Siloam." And so the man went and washed and came home seeing. This man was healed. He came home seeing. He was no longer blind. Imagine that. A blind man, his whole life, is no longer blind. His neighbors and those who had formerly seen him begged and asked, "Isn't this the same man who used to sit and beg?" This guy was a beggar because that was his way of income. Some claimed that he was, and others said, "No, he only looks like him. That must be his doppelganger." This is where I would hope for a large laugh in the crowd. That's not really in the Bible. I put that there. I like to add things sometimes. But the man himself insisted, "I am the man." Well, they asked, "How then were your eyes opened?" And the man replied, "The man they called Jesus made some mud and put it on my eyes. And he told me to go to Siloam and washed. And so I went and washed. And then, don't know how, but I could see." I'm pretty sure he's excited, but the people there knew who this man was because he was a beggar. He was at a main entry point into the city or wherever he's at, and people knew about this man. And they know that he was blind his whole life. And now that he can see, and people are like, "How did this happen to you?" They saw the before and after, and they wanted to know how this happened to you. And they became curious. And then they said in verse 12, "Well, where is this man? Where is this man, Jesus, you're talking about?" And at this point, some arguments broke out. People started asking about his blindness being healed, people not believing him, but the word was traveling because of the transformation that happened in this man. And everyone knew this man before, and then at some point, people who were angry about his healing called him back and asked about the story again. Like, wait. Tell us how this happened to you again, because I know what you're like now. There's certainly not a way that you're that same person. And again, he replies in verse 25, "Whether he's a sinner or not, I don't know. But one thing I do know, I was blind, but now I see. I was once blind, but now I see." Now, what I love about that story is that he didn't have all the answers. He didn't know. All he knows is that he was blind his whole life. He met a man named Jesus. There was some mud involved, and now he can see. It's crazy, but I love that story. And no matter how much people questioned him, his response was the same. "I was blind, but now I see, and the difference is Jesus." The difference is Jesus. And he is basically saying, this is how I was. This is how I am. I don't know how, but the difference is Jesus. And because of his story, word started traveling, and people started seeking out Jesus. And I would go along to say that because of this man's story, his simplicity of a story, that he alone, his story sparked and ignited the faith and curiosity about God and other people. And it's the same for sharing our faith. When we go to share about what Jesus has done in us, it's the same for that. I think about those Instagram stories. You know, you're scrolling through Instagram, sometimes you're seeing how fast you can get through it. I find myself doing that sometimes where there's no possible way that you can see what you're looking at. You just got that habit of scrolling. Is that what's called, scrolling? And you come across someone's fitness photo before and after, and you're like, whoa, what did you do? How did this happen to you? It's the same for sharing our faith. It's the same for this blind man. I don't know, but now I know it's just Jesus that did this to me. And we don't have to have all the answers to share our faith. You don't need to know everything there is about God or the Bible to share your faith. All you have to do is to tell them how your life has been changed and how you've been transformed and the difference that Jesus made in your life. But here's the thing. If Jesus has changed your life, if you are a follower of Jesus, if you've really put your faith in Jesus and he's made that difference in your life, you have a story to tell. We all have a story to tell. There's no such thing as a too small of a story or a too big of a story. If you put your faith in Jesus, he's made a difference in your life and you have a story to tell. But how do we tell our stories in the right way? Because like I said, there are times when it's just a little bit too long or too boring. Well, I want to give you 3 handles, 3 things to remember about how to tell your story. This is very practical, everyone. This is very practical. But think about before Christ. Everybody say BC. BC. Online, BC. This means before Christ. Before Christ. This is what your life was like before Christ, before you met Jesus. For example, maybe I was chasing dreams, material things, I was a workaholic, almost lost my family, whatever the case is, that was your life before Christ. Maybe I found my fulfillment in sex and drugs or men or women, whatever it was. Another example for people who may have grown up in the church, but you still live in fear and depression and anxiety because Jesus really hasn't kind of made a difference in your life yet, because we have people that have been in church the whole life that still don't know who Jesus is. But no matter how many times you did these things, you knew that something was missing. This is all your life before Christ. It's super simple. But this is where you talk about, man, before Jesus, this is what I was like. Usually it's kind of some sad and somber stuff, and some people have had really painful pasts before Christ. Some people, like me, I actually grew up in the church, and so mine's not as painful, although it took me a while to understand who Jesus really was. But this is before Christ. BC stands for before Christ. The second one is called MC. Everybody say MC. MC. MC stands for met Christ. And this is the part where you talk about how and why you put your faith in Jesus. What brought you to that point? What was it that sparked your interest, that made you start wondering who God is and what Jesus might make in your life? Maybe you hit rock bottom. Maybe you felt God speaking to you. I've heard stories of people saying, I was driving down the road and I saw something, and for some reason I had to pull over because God was speaking to me. And they met Jesus on the side of the road. That happens. But what was it that brought you to that point? Not only that, but when did you make the decision to actually put your faith in Him? So it's good to know, like, I've been a follower of Christ, but when did you actually put your faith in Jesus? And what was that experience like? How did you do it? Did you pray by yourself in your car, your room? Did someone help you? I've helped a lot of people of praying with them, put their faith in Jesus before, but what was that like? Think about, to help bring this one to light, think about engagement stories. Like, we all know if someone says, oh, you're engaged, congratulations, how did it happen? Or maybe, we met 20 years ago, we're married now, we met 20 years ago. Well, tell us about when you met so-and-so. You can probably tell when it happened, who you were with, what the photographer's name was, because we do that nowadays, there's always a photographer, right? But like, you know exactly when that happened. But it's very important that you know when that happened. Mine was in 1992. That's when I put my faith in Jesus. It was in my parents' living room in 1992. But it's very important that you know about when that happened and what made you make that decision. A question I always get from people is, do I have to know the exact date? Because I know there's people that know the exact date, the exact time, and where they did it, all that stuff. I want to give a hesitant no. It's not important that you know the exact date, but it's very important that you're able to look back and know how you did it and when you did it. Again, mine was in 92. I know people who put their faith in Jesus here last week, and I'm hoping people put their faith in Jesus today. We'll be talking more about that, but I want to continue. The third one is AC. How many people thought DC? AC, yeah, I don't know if I'm allowed to say that on the church stage, right? But AC. AC stands for after Christ. And this is the part of the story that you want to emphasize the most, because this is where you get to share, in essence, about what Jesus has done for you, what the change that God has made in your life. Paul says in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 17, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. The old is gone and the new has come. You know what your old life was like? What's your new life like? How has God changed you? What difference has Jesus made in your life? Again, everyone's experiences are different. Everyone's past are different. Everyone's futures are different. The way that we do this together is different. My story is different from yours. My after Christ is different than yours. But the main question to answer, the main thing to talk about at this part after Christ is how your life has been different after meeting Him. In short, this is how I was. This is how I am. And the difference is Jesus. And so I want to encourage everyone in here to start thinking about something, thinking about your story, because it's important that you are able to begin writing your story and knowing your story and being able to answer if someone asks you about your story. It's important that you begin practicing your story, because your story is a powerful tool that God will use to lead others to faith in Him. Whether you realize it or not, it will lead others to faith in Him. And so I want to encourage you to begin thinking about that, and to help you with your story and to provide a tool for you to help you begin writing it. This is going to be the same tool that we use in our volunteer staff orientation, in our baptism stories and stuff. But if you email stories@relevantcommunity.org, sometime here in the next couple days, we'll send you a worksheet that you can begin working through that on your own. But stories@relevantcommunity.org, and we'll send you some information to help you begin writing your story. And also, we would love to hear your story too. Like if you have a story, which if you're a follower of Jesus, you have a story to tell, we want to hear your story. And we'd love for you to just type it out, send it to us. If you want help, say, I need some help with this. It's 19 pages long. It's like Jimmy's. But we'll help you with that. But just send an email to us at stories@relevantcommunity.org. Now, something to be aware of, as you begin writing and practicing and telling your stories, that there's going to be people who have questions. There's going to be people who say, nah, I don't believe that. Just like the story of the blind man, they just couldn't get over the fact that there was such a difference made in this person's life. There's going to be people that do that. But you know what? People can't argue with your story. You know why? Because it's your story. They can't argue with your story because it's your story. They can't argue with mine. Mine is Jimmy George's story, and no one can ever tell me that it didn't happen. Mine happened. I know it. But your story is important because those who know you are interested in you. Your circle of influence, they know you, they're interested in you. And they watch you, and they can relate to you, and they see the changes that God has made and is continuing to make in your life. They can grab a hold of something. This is great. When you tell your story, they can grab a hold of something in your life and learn something new or more about God. So as they're seeking God, they can start hearing different stories from people, and they're like, I'm learning all these things about God just through people's stories. But you don't have to know everything in here about the Bible. You don't have to know everything about Christianity or God. You just have to know what your story is. And God's going to provide you opportunities to share different aspects of your story with others as you go about doing this. I want to invite my friend John here up on stage. John Upton is a friend of mine. I've met John about 8 to 10 years ago. John is in my T-Life group. I love John, and the reason why I am asking John to come up here is because I didn't know a lot about John's past. I assumed he was always this amazing man. And when he was telling my wife and I about his story a while back, I was like, wait, what? There's no way. I learned that John, he used to have a fro, kind of a big fro. But this is John. And John, just to get started, give us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so my name is John Upton. I've been coming to Relevant for about 6 years now. I work at a place called New Horizons Computer Learning, and I've been selling IT training for about 6 years also. I've been married to my wife for 7 years, and we have 3 small children, 3 small girls, 5, 2, and 4.
3 weddings coming up.
In 4 months, yeah. So I'm not looking forward to that. But.
Yeah, I'll be gone when it's time to help finance that. So, awesome. Well, thanks, John. Well, we had lunch the other day. I'm going to just ask you some more about your life and stuff. Will you tell us about your life before Jesus, before you knew who he was? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I actually grew up in a small town outside of Omaha called Weeping Water. So I did always have this curiosity about God, but my parents never actually went to church, and so neither did I. I remember when I was about 12, I asked if I could go to church, and they said, you can. We're not going to, so therefore I didn't. And so although I felt love in my home, there was a lot of dysfunction. So my mom was kind of the leader of the house. And my dad, he had a faith from when he was young, but he never really shared it. So never really got that. And so without much guidance or direction, I decided that I was just going to live for myself. I thought that was the best thing to do. And so that led to a lot of poor choices, a lot of bad decisions, and just really destructive behavior. And so, when I was in high school, I began drinking, smoking pot, and started having sex at that time. Became addicted to pornography, and so it was just a really. I thought I was doing the right things. I thought I was living for myself, and I was having a good time. I didn't realize there was more out there, and so I just continued down that path.
Yeah. And so at what point in your life did you decide something's missing here, and then kind of tell us about what happened there?
Yeah, I definitely couldn't have done it on my own. When I was about 23 years old, I was going to Metro, and there was this girl in my class that I thought was cute, but I was too afraid to actually talk to her in class. So I realized that I had an online class with her, and so I decided, it was like 8 o'clock at night, I'm like, I'm just going to go ahead and message her. I'm going to message her, and I'm going to send her this message, and we're going to get connected. And then I read it, and I thought, this is very creepy. I'm not going to do this. So I deleted it, tried to go to bed, but couldn't sleep because I couldn't stop thinking about it. And so, less like a creeper, I actually sent that same message at 2 in the morning. So,
yeah, that's not creepy.
Yeah, not at all. And so, luckily, she didn't see the timestamp because she did become my wife.
Nice.
So,
that's good.
yeah.
That's good. Awesome.
For whatever reason, unlike any other time before, I was brutally honest with her at the very beginning. I wanted her to trust me, and so I told her the truth. And so she should have ran for the hills. I'm thankful that she didn't. But she was the one. About 6 months into it, we were having a conversation, and I still had that curiosity about God. And so she mentioned that there was this church that she used to go to called LifeGate. We were living around 156th and Q at the time, and so I thought, I had that curiosity, so I thought,
give it a shot.
I could do that.
Yeah,
let's try it out, right? Surprised her completely, but so we started going to LifeGate, and I knew kind of who Jesus was. I knew of Jesus, but I didn't know anything about Jesus. I'd never heard what he did, why he came, and what he offered. And so over the course of a couple months is when my heart really started to warm toward wanting to accept Jesus as the forgiver of my sins and the leader of my life. And so again, about 2 months later, I knew I had to make that decision. And so they basically invited people to come up to the front
at the church.
Yep, if you were wanted to make that declaration. And so I was nervous as all get out. I didn't know I was going to do it before when I came to that day, and heart started beating out of my chest. I describe it that way all the time, just because I can't. That's the only way to describe that feeling. It literally felt like it was going to come out of my chest.
Yep.
And I was really nervous, and so I ran up there, tears. Gave my life to Christ at that moment, and it's not like something immediately changed. It's not like that all my I stopped sinning.
Yep.
Although they were forgiven at that time, it was still a process. It was still a journey.
What year was that when you did that?
That was 2011.
Awesome. Yeah, I think you said that.
Yep.
And so after that point, after you put your faith in Jesus, you said your heart was pounding, you did it. What has God done in your life since then? How has he transformed you from
Yeah,
then?
so again, as I mentioned, like I wasn't an overnight success at that point, right? It was still a process. It was still a journey that I had to go through. All my brokenness wasn't healed immediately, but over time, what began to happen is the desires of my heart began to change. So the destructive behavior that I did do in the past, I began to not want to do those things anymore. And I wanted to do the things of God. I wanted to serve him more. And I realized that he had a purpose for me that was bigger than myself, that was bigger than living for myself.
Yeah.
And I wanted that. And so over time, I began to throw away the things of the past and go headfirst into the things of God. And so really, for me, it's knowing that he has a personal plan and purpose for my life.
Yeah. The security and the knowing is big in you.
Yeah. There's a fulfillment there that I didn't have before. That was, there's a purpose for my life, and my life can count for something other than myself.
Yeah, awesome. Well, John, appreciate you sharing your story. Something I've appreciated about you is just your love for God. Like I said, it was kind of a shocker when you told me what you were like before Christ.
Yeah.
But that's what we're all like before Christ. And so appreciate you telling everybody that's watching online. Can we give John a round of applause? Thank you so much, John. Awesome. Well, for all who are followers of Christ, I'm running just a little bit over on time. But we don't have a service afterwards, so bear with me. But for all of people who say that you're following Jesus in here, you know that you've made this decision. Like, whether you realize it or not, you are God's messenger. He's given you a commission. He's given you the command to go and share your faith with others. As you go in your workplaces, He's given you this. Your life became a walking testimony of what God can do in and through you, from hopelessness to hopefulness, from rejected to accepted. Through you, the story of unseen to seen, from isolation to community, from hated to loved, from far off to found. But you became a walking testimony of what God can do in and through you and through your life. As we come in for a landing, I just want everyone in here to think about that for a moment. For those of you who are watching us online, they're streaming here online, wherever you're at, I want you to think about this question. I want to go back to that met Christ portion because I want to make it clear. I want people to understand that it's super important that we really know that we're following Jesus. And so I want you to go and think about that when I met Christ portion. When did you do that? When did you do that? For me, again, 1992. For John, 2011. But when did you do that? Are you able to point back to that? And maybe you're not sure if you have. I know there's a lot of people like, I don't actually know if I've ever made that decision. Did I do it when I was a kid? Maybe when I was baptized as a baby, did I do it then? I don't know how many decisions you were making as a baby, but I would probably say probably not. But some of you aren't exactly sure when you put your faith in Jesus, but God doesn't want you to wonder. He doesn't want us to wonder if we are actually following Him or not. He wants us to know. And so I want you to think about that. If you're not sure, but you want to know for sure, then today could be your day. You can make that decision today to follow Him. And so that today would be March 15th, 2020. That'd be today. And so I want to invite us all together to pray. And for those of you streaming who are followers of Christ, I'd invite you to pray as well for these people who might be contemplating. I want to ask, if you've not put your faith in Jesus today, or you're not sure that you have and you want to make today your day, let's go ahead and do that together. But God, I just want to pray for people who want to make today their day, the day of their transition point when they put your faith in you. God, for those people to be able to surrender their lives. For those people to know, I need to surrender my life to you, God. I ask them that you make that clear to them today. And all you have to do is just pray, God, will you just forgive my sins? I've been living for my past. And be the leader of my life. In Jesus' name, amen.